What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Forge to Win podcast. Today, I have Aubin Gosson, I believe is how you say your last name. I hope I didn't butcher that.
You're close.
But she is someone that I met actually very recently. She called me. She actually cold called me, which is pretty awesome because I talk a lot about cold calling. And we had an amazing conversation. We kind of talked about what she's got going on, how she's expanding her business, and from there, I thought she would be a fantastic guest to bring to you guys on just what it looks like to pursue your dreams, pursue your goals, and put in the hard work and kind of reap the reward and love the journey along the way. So, Aubin, I am excited to have you. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, to jump right in, why don't you just kind of set the landscape for me, right? Like what does your business look like today? What are you doing? What are you focused on? You know, a lot of people are nervous in the market. And when I spoke to you, you know, I don't get an ounce of nervousness. I get a lot of excitement, right? From the moment I spoke to you, there's just a lot of excitement, a lot of good things going on. So what are you focused on right now? What does your business look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So my main business is real estate wholesaling in the state of Michigan. I do it virtually. I live in Wisconsin, and I focus in on the Detroit market. So right now, the majority of my business is being wholesaled. A side business is investing. My husband and I, we flip houses. My husband owns a construction company. I'm a real estate agent. So we do investing of our own locally in Wisconsin. And then, like I said, mainly just virtual wholesaling is my main focus. I own a Keegley franchise. Nice. Those of you that don't know what Keegley is, it is the largest wholesaling company in the U.S. So I bought a franchise about a year ago. I've been using that system and it's been super beneficial. So
that is awesome. So what made you why choose Detroit out of every market you could choose going virtually? Yeah. Why go into Michigan?
That's a great question. I'm actually from Detroit. So I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit. I've always just loved the real estate there. My family also lives there still. So there's a lot of like tax benefits, like, you know, traveling back and forth and that kind of thing. Also, I always wanted to choose a market that I eventually want to own real estate in. So my goal actually next year for 2023 is to start picking up some Airbnbs in the Detroit market. So I wanted something that was, you know, convenient as well for being virtual. So if I ever was in a pinch, ever needed someone to look at a property, I have so many connections locally that I could call up, you know, a family member, a friend, something like that. So just seems like a really good market. Also, if you don't know about the Detroit market, people have just put so much money into the city of Detroit the last, you know, 10, 15 years. So there's a ton of developments. The appreciation rate is outrageous. People have bought properties like, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, done nothing to them and sold them for like 3-4 times the value of what they bought them for. So it's just appreciating like crazy. It's a great market. So those are my main reasons.
That's awesome. You know, so I started in Dallas, Texas. Okay.
Yeah.
And when I was there, I started doing virtual wholesaling. I did a deal in Tennessee. I knew I was going to Michigan. I did a deal here. I've done a few deals in New York, Pennsylvania, and some others. And one of the things I noticed when I started going virtually, specifically with JVing, is there was a big difference in my personal morale, depending on how much I cared about the area. So the fact that you were like, you know what, I want to go to Detroit because 1, I know the area. 2, I want to own stuff there. It creates a little bit more excitement rather than just like trying to tap into this market that you're not really familiar with. You don't really ever want to go, and there's not really a personal connection with, you know. And for me, that was one of the reasons I pulled back a lot from my virtual areas, is because it's like I'm buying an Airbnb right now by the beach, like a mile from Lake Michigan, and the excitement, right? Just that passion that you can bring to, this is what I want. I can't drive you from the beginning, but it can definitely propel you and make you more excited and do, you know, more and more work and buy more and more houses and just be excited about your area. So I think that's cool that was a factor in you going in here and be like, you know what, I'm from there. I like it there and I want to buy properties. oh, by
Yeah.
the way, let me make sure it's going to be a good area to own real estate.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's also kind of like you were saying, just a different level of confidence too. If you know the areas, if you can rattle off, the cities or the zip codes that you want to be in, there's just a different level of confidence. Whereas if you virtually wholesale in a market that you know nothing about, you're at risk of making yourself, maybe sound stupid a couple times on the phone, but it's going to happen anyways. But again, yeah, lots of reasons for getting into
No,
that market.
I think that's a strong point. And one of the reasons why it's so strong is the more general, and I love your thoughts on this, the more general we are on the phone, the less the less knowledgeable or the more fake we sound, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're not able to speak, I used to have this massive map of DFW on my wall.
Yeah.
When I was down there. And this was before a lot of the tools came out, right? This was back in 2013. Yeah. And I used to have this map, and I would jump on the phone. I was doing a lot of direct mail back then. I'd get on the phone, and when I did, they would talk about it. I'd look it up, and I'd find their house, and I'd walk over to the map, and I'd look at it while I was talking to them, just so I could mention something nearby.
Absolutely.
And just get to know the layout, because it just helps with that conversation, it dives in. So
yeah,
that's super cool.
That's interesting that you say that, because I totally agree, number one. But number two, a hedge fund that we were selling a ton of properties to, it was one of my favorite disposition calls ever, because he knew exactly, down to the street, like, I need a property that's 2-bedroom, 800 square feet on this street, and it was just so specific. And it not only makes you sound knowledgeable, but I know as a wholesaler, if I bring that to him at the price that he needs it at, it's a done deal. So I think that being specific is important on both acquisitions and dispositions. So,
all right. So I'm going to go off script here, because I have personally been I found myself frustrated and also really excited when I talk to other buyers, because I'm wholesaling here quite a bit.
Sure. Yeah.
And what you said is so powerful. And when I'm buying from wholesalers, being able to tell them exactly what you want is one of the most powerful things. Because I was talking to a guy, what was it, Monday? And I'm like, hey, man, what do you want? He's like, I'll buy anything. I'm like,
yeah,
okay, that's not helpful, right? Like, what do you actually want? And finally, he kind of broke down. He's like, well, I'll look at anything in the Big Rapids area. And I was like, okay. Well, what about, is there a certain criteria? Do you want a certain amount of bathrooms? Do you want a certain amount of equity? Are you renting them? Do you want cash flow? Like, what? And I'm trying to open up this conversation, and it's just like dead stare, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've found is that the more specific I am, and the more that I just am straight with people, they'll try to meet those needs. They're not trying to push me up. They're just, what do you want so I can bring that to you?
Yeah.
And are you finding that when you're working with people? Or are you finding, people are a lot more, what's the word, holding their cards to their chest than what they want?
Yeah. I think a big part of it is the approach, right? Because I think I think the reason why a lot of these buyers are more apprehensive about their buy box is because, number one, they're either not serious buyers. Like, that could be a large portion of them. I've run into that where, I think I had a good conversation. I think they're a serious buyer, not really sure what they're looking for. It comes down to it. I bring them a good deal and they flake, right? So that could be it, number one. Number two, with the amount of wholesalers that probably call them and don't know what they're talking about, it probably gives them a bad taste in their mouth when they actually meet someone like you who could bring them a really good deal. But they're like, I've been down this road. I had 10 calls in the last month and no one has brought me a good property. So I always try to deliver value first on the phone, and I found that to be a lot more helpful. I actually just had a call this morning with a large buyer, and I couldn't figure out why he wouldn't respond to me. And I realized I just had his numbers wrong. I had his buy box wrong. So I delivered value. I said, hey, here's this property. I think it's in an area you like. I think it has the cap rate you like. Can you give me some feedback on it? Gave me feedback immediately. So I think just leading with value has helped me a lot in that kind of, dispo call with a buyer.
Yeah, and just being transparent, right? Hey, I think this is
Yes,
where
for
you're
sure.
at. Can you give me feedback? When I started raising private money,
Hmm.
that was how I started. I had a deal, and instead of just being like, "Hey, can you give me money for this house?" Right?
Sure.
That doesn't work. That's kind of awkward. But instead going back and saying, "Hey, can I get your opinion on what you think about this home?" And then
Hmm.
it's like we have a meeting, we sit down and say, I'm looking for someone. Do you have anybody you'd recommend? And then they would be like, you know, I could lend you that money. And that was literally how I started my private money raising, was just
Yeah.
like that. It's very similar. So, all right, so take me back. Okay. So you're making these calls, you're wholesaling quite a bit in Detroit, you're doing things in Wisconsin, your husband's got a construction company. My assumption is you weren't just born with all of this stuff happening, right? That at some point there was a transition from, all right, I want to get into real estate, right?
Yeah.
I want to go down this route, up into the point where you bought the Keegley franchise. What is kind of that origin story? Where did you start, and what led you into wanting to invest in real estate and get started in this industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it all starts with just wanting freedom, right? I think that's kind of why a ton of people get into real estate, is just desiring that freedom, not being tied to a 9 to 5 or even a business, right? I would say it goes all the way back to my childhood. Like, I've always been very business oriented. My dad manages a hedge fund, and so he owns a business, and he's always been very entrepreneurial, always taught me that kind of mindset. So it's always been ingrained in me from a very young age. I remember when I was like 7 years old, I would literally be out from morning till night selling lemonade at the corner every chance I got. Like, I was always trying to bring in money. I've had a job since I was 12 years old. Like, I've always loved to work. And so I didn't really know what that looked like. I think still I grew up in a really traditional home, and it was always very much stressed that, like, hey, you need to go to school, you need to get a job, and you need to work, right? But I
Right.
knew that I wanted more than that. I knew that I wanted investments. I knew that I wanted a business. I wanted to lead something. So actually, it's kind of really started in college, I would say. I did an internship. You might know of it. It's a house painting internship, and basically, they allow a college student to run a house painting business, and it's extremely hard. I would knock on doors, I would cold call for hours and hours every day. I would build up a business, I would hire employees, manage them as a college student. It was great experience, and I
Wow.
did really, really well with it. And that's kind of what gave me the confidence to say, okay, I know that I can do this. I know that I can outwork everybody around me. I just don't know what avenue I want to do. And so house painting, it kind of got me thinking, like, oh, I think construction would be cool. That's not really what I'm super interested in. And then I met my husband's cousin, who owns a huge real estate empire in Wisconsin. And he really started teaching us about how to invest, how to manage your money, how to, like, literally live off of such a small margin and put everything else into real estate. And he taught us exactly what he did, and it just made me really desire that life. And so that's, and really what pulled the trigger for me. Right out of college, I moved to Wisconsin and started learning from him. So
That's awesome. Just being able to take what you had this drive for. Now, when you say you were in a traditional family, but then in college you took this internship,
yeah.
I can imagine there's probably a point where, from a family side, they're like, why are you trying to go down this route? Why not
Yeah.
just go get a job and,
Hmm.
get pay and be secure, right? That
Yeah.
tends to be the main thing. How did Aubin process, I'm going to go do this on my own and run this thing, versus the counsel from, say, your family? Was there a separation there? Was there something you had to kind of pull back from? Did you lean into it? Were they supportive? How did that play into this process?
Yeah, I think my parents have always been pretty supportive of like, hey, if you want to do it, go do it. But there was definitely some pushback. It was a family member who went through the program and I picked his brain about it. And he said, do not do it. He gave me the advice. He said, don't do it. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And personally, I'm really stubborn. So if someone tells me not to do something, it makes me want to do it more. So
Yeah.
I kind of came to the point where I was like, okay, I know this is going to be extremely hard. I know I might fail, but I'm a sophomore in college, and I think that this is going to be really awesome experience. If I make no money, whatever, I'll go back to working at a restaurant. So it was just it was one of the first times actually that I'm like, all right, I'm going to take this risk, knowing and being okay with the fact that I very well could fail. But I'm going to put all my eggs in this one basket. I'm going to work really hard. Worst case scenario, I get really good experience.
That's super awesome, because I think our failures, I just posted something actually that I saw from Ray Dalio that talked about it was like fail correctly, right? And I think there's an aspect of everybody who's succeeding that we see succeeding, it's just a matter of our perspective, right? That's just what we see. Everyone who's doing something big is failing somewhere, and that failure, not only the risk to be able to do it and be like, I'm okay with it, but then when we run into that hardship, how we deal with that takes character, right? That's where it really challenges us, and it brings out, okay, who is Ronnie, behind closed doors? Who is Aubin when things aren't going right, when things are going tough? And I think how we handle those moments are really those pivotal points to what happens in front of people, right? What happens in the public eye, because we might fail 15 times and then that one success is massive, but it took those 15 trials in order for us to get there. And being okay with that journey, being okay with that hardship is, it's powerful. And I think it's almost, not to scare you guys who are out there, but it's almost a prerequisite, right? That the failure, it builds, I said in a recent conversation, it takes a little bit of courage sprinkled with some creativity, and that's all it takes, right? Because most people aren't doing it. And so if you can just get a little bit, it'll just start snowballing, right? It's just those little steps, and it'll start snowballing, and that confidence will build up. So I think that's awesome. So I would love to imagine that Aubin is always been an incredible, everything you touch turned to gold. Every deal you talked to was amazing. But I imagine, I've been on this journey for a while, and I want to know about like a really bad decision you made along the way and how it affected your business, how you processed it, and how you kind of came out of that and how it impacted you.
Sure. Yeah. I have two that come to mind. I think, before I go into it, I think whenever you're in a desperate place, it always causes you to, not always, but a lot of times causes you to make bad decisions. And I look back on my failures, and I think a lot of times out of desperation, I don't have a sound mind, right? And so the first one that comes to mind is, somewhat recent in the last year. I had a wholesale deal that basically I did not vet the buyer properly, and it was totally my fault. But I was so desperate to like get a deal across my plate, not only to bring income in, but to pay my acquisitions people who are working so hard, and all these other factors and pressures that, I put on myself. And so I had a deal, I had a buyer lined up. I didn't vet him. I didn't get proof of funds. I didn't do my due diligence. I didn't ensure that the earnest money was actually in. So when it came to the closing table, he didn't fund the deal, right? And so it not only hurt me, but it hurt the people who worked on the deal. It hurt my relationship with, the agent who brought the deal, with the wholesaler, with all these different people. And I look back and I'm like, okay, well, not only am I out, a lot of money, I'm also burning these bridges, but all it would have taken was me being a little bit more intentional and actually vetting these people and actually just really being a good business owner, right? So that's the one I think of. And I think of another one back in college, and it wasn't really an instantaneous, like, bad decision. But it was over time. I was with that internship. I was making a lot of money as a college student and literally blowing the money. Like, just had no concept of like how I could have probably bought like 3 properties in college, and I was just blowing my money, you know, and I look back and I'm like, gosh, I just want to kick myself. But again, I think that like by doing that, like by acting that way over the span of a few years, I learned so much. I value literally every dollar. I am the cheapest person that I know. I'm so frugal now because I look back and I'm just like, I was such an idiot. Like I could have 3 more rental properties right now.
Right. That's amazing. There's a book. Are you familiar with Good to Great by Jim Collins?
I've heard it, but I have never read it.
Okay, so he just came out with another book that is called Why Great Companies Fail, I believe is what the name of the book is. And it's a smaller book. And in the book, he basically has 5 stages of what he calls the decline. Okay. And one of those stages, I think it's stage 4, is the denial of the risk and the peril in front of you, right? It's denying your reality. And I would assume there's this aspect, you talk about desperation. It's like, okay, I've done this before. I'm a rock star. And then it's like, everything's going good. So you stop that diligence that took you there, right?
Sure.
And then it's the next step where it's like, all of a sudden I'm following everything. And it's like, man, I just need to get this deal done, right? If I just get this deal done, it'll be my salvation. And then you don't do that due diligence, right? You're just, anything that's a red flag, you're just like, no, it's fine. It'll just work. Once we close, it'll be good. Like I'll get $32,000 and it'll be fine, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is something. So a book that changed my life was Ego is the Enemy. And I'm a big reader. I don't know if I've read most of these books on the shelf behind me. So
wow, that's impressive.
Quite a bit. So anyway, in Ego the Enemy, he talks about whether you're on the rise, whether you're at the top, or whether you're on a decline, don't let your ego get in the way. Just do the work. And it's so easy when we're in desperation just to, I'll just throw it together, you know, put it together and go and just try to make it happen. And a lot of times for me, that's when things get really bad. You know what I'm saying? That's when, like what you said, all of a sudden 3 relationships you really valued, you're in, you know, you're now trying to manage them to bring them, you know, resuscitate them rather than letting them die. And so, guys, when you're out there and you're plugging away, like, it's okay to take a step back and take a day, right? Take a morning and go to Panera or Starbucks and just sit there and consider and write out and let the journal be your therapist. So you can just, okay, what do I need to do in this situation to make sure I'm good? So I love that. So the next thing I like to say, or I like to ask, is what's a really good decision you made along the way that like you're super proud of that has changed the game for you?
That's a great question. I think I mentioned it before that like a lot of risks that I've taken have been some of my best decisions. And so I bought my first flip when I was 22.
Okay.
And I was really, I mean, I was fresh out of college. So again, had some money saved up, but really didn't know what I was doing. And I was doing acquisitions for someone else, and it's easy to spend someone else's money, right? Your money's not on the line. And then I told myself like, okay, I want to purchase a house by the end of the year to flip. And I had a deal that came, it was a auction. And so I had it come across my plate. And, you know, I was bidding on it and stuff like that. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't actually think I'm going to get this. So I wasn't really that nervous. Ended up being the winning bidder, and I had to fund the deal. And it was an extremely hard decision because everything, my talk was becoming my reality, right? I was like, yeah, I'm going to buy a flip. I'm going to do it. And I think just actually putting my money where my mouth was really, really difficult the first time, because what I didn't realize is that I had a grip on my bank account. You know, that was my security. And back then it was, I mean, I was funding it with cash. So literally a huge chunk of what I had sitting in the bank account was then funded. But really what that did, I mean, I ended up getting through the flip, whatever, it went great. But that decision and that risk skyrocketed my husband's construction business and other investments that we've purchased. But it was a really big like mental hurdle that I had to get over in the beginning.
Unpack that. Why did that decision, or how did that decision skyrocket your guys' businesses? Like what?
Yeah.
Just unpack that for me. Why was that the case? Was it you just weren't thinking big enough? Was it
I think so, yeah.
You were holding on and not investing like you should? Like, how do you feel?
Yeah.
Like, what happened afterwards that caused those dominoes to fall?
Yeah, I think I can sum it up in one word, and that's fear, right? I think everyone deals with some level of fear, and I was caged into this fear that was extremely hard for me to break out of. Like I said, I was doing acquisitions for other people. I was finding good deals, and we were buying them and flipping them under a different real estate company. But when it came down to the wire, I had to, number one, break out of that fear and realize like, okay, this flip could go really poorly. It was a foreclosure. So you're not supposed to walk the property beforehand. So we didn't really know what we were getting into. And also, you know, what if the foundation is bad? What if that's a $20,000 or $30,000 repair that we might have to do? What if the flip doesn't sell? What if the market turns? What if all this money and this work and this time is gone and the house gets foreclosed on? Like, just worst case scenario. And I think that was a big mental shift that I had to make. I had to take those thoughts captive and say, no, I'm going to think of the best case scenario. I'm going to be optimistic. And no matter what, we're going to figure it out. And so not really more of like a physical thing. It was more of a mental thing. It was something that I had to really work through and be like, okay, this is the lifestyle I want. This is what I'm chasing after. And I know that at some point I'm going to have to put my money where my mouth is. And now is that time, right? So just like making myself think through it and take the risk was, just breaking out of that cage of fear, like I said.
You know, I find that real estate is often a mental game, and the mental game shifts over time. And, you know, it's probably once you learn the strategies, right? Once you understand how to wholesale, once you know how a fix and flip goes, once you start managing contractors for the first time, when you buy your first sub-2 deal, when you start getting your first rentals, like a lot of that, it's new. And so there's that unknown, right? But eventually you know how to do it. It's fairly simple. It's a structure. Then it starts messing with you up here, right? It's like, could I really get 5 more properties? Could I buy that $700,000 deal? Like, what am I missing? What is this? What is this? And then you might talk to somebody else. And I think this is why community is so important. I go over here and I talk to this guy. He's like, oh yeah, I just bought this $3.2 million storage facility. I'm like, wait a minute, what? How did that work? What was the cash flow? What was it? Why am I freaking out about this? Like, he's like, yeah, it's a pretty good deal. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm good. Right. And so another podcast I do, Real Estate Power Play, me and those guys text like every day, right? We're like a tight knit group. We help each other out in each of our businesses. We've all got different strengths. And that community has helped propel me. And each one of those guys would say the same thing, just being able to say, yo, this is what I got going on. What do you guys think? And having those people there, it helps that mental game where it always feels like the grass is greener in someone else's field, but it's only greener because they're tending it, right? If you tend your field, you're going to have that. And they're probably looking at you being like, man, I wish I had that patch of land. And man, I really like what you're talking about there. So before we move on to the next step, just because I'm curious and I like going where I'm curious. You were acquisitions under this other guy.
Yep.
You were working in his company. You were learning the entire business.
Right.
For how long? How long was that?
So I was doing flips and wholesaling under him for a year and a half.
Okay.
And then I stayed under him, but went to commercial for like 2 years. And then I bought Keegley.
You were under him, then you bought Keegley. So After being under him for a year and a half, why, instead of just going out and doing it completely on your own and kind of taking the stuff you learned from him and opened up your own company, what made you start to explore Keegley? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what made you go to the franchise side versus let me just figure this out, right? Especially with what you said about, man, I started this internship and I just kind of put all this together. What made you lean to that and be like, you know, it's valuable for me to put my money there? Because I think this is a good thing for people to weigh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I am not I'm not a big believer in reinventing the wheel. I think that there's a lot of smart people out there. I think a lot of people have figured it out. And so personally, I'd rather buy a system that I know is working, something that is proven to work, versus try to figure it out myself, right? So I knew that if I bought a system that was working, I knew that I could outwork anyone, right? But if I don't have a system in place, I can work as hard as I want, but I might be going in the wrong direction. So to me, I just kind of saw it as more efficient, quite honestly,
Okay.
of, okay, I want to start bringing in deals pretty much immediately versus testing all these different strategies to see what works. There's already a system here and I can just run with it. So that was a big thing. Also, just Keegley, like I love the community aspect of it, like what you were talking about. It is huge to have a community of people. It's really easy to feel isolated in business and especially in real estate. And so having that community, there's literally always someone I can talk to about, hey, what investment, what new strategies are you implementing? And like just having that network of people at my fingertips at any time, it has been really helpful too.
That's awesome. That's super, super cool. How do you stay disciplined? You talk a lot about being able to outwork everyone, right? And I think that's an incredibly admirable personality trait. How do you how do you keep your mind right? How do you stay disciplined? How do you wake up and not let the mounting, whether it's in the world or all the things in front of you or your goals, how do you keep that constant vigilance, right? In your business, in the work? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, I'm a Christian. So like for me, I think mindset has always been a little different. I've always, believed in God and believed in Jesus and just had this different level of hope that I think a lot of people, don't have. And so for me, I know that my worth is not in the business. And so I think when your worth is tied to your business or tied to your money or tied to how many properties you pick up, it's really easy to get discouraged. But when your worth is tied to something higher than you, then it's a lot easier to realize like, okay, I can keep a level mind. But discipline in general, I think has not really been something that has been super difficult for me. I eat really well. I work out. I go to bed early. I wake up early. And I think it's more about routine, right? Like, because when you get into a routine and you have consistency, you see results. That's just a fact of the matter. If you are consistent with anything, good or bad, you will see some kind of results. And so I saw that from a really young age. My parents were very, very disciplined. Like we ate really well as kids. We never really ate junk food. And, we were a really active family and I could see that we were different than the people around us. And I liked that. I always felt like I was getting ahead. And so that motivation kind of drove me to continue that lifestyle through college and, into my adult life too.
That's super powerful, guys. Like go back and listen to that. It's that slight edge principle. There's a book called The Slight Edge. Of course, I'm going to recommend another book, but it's the idea that if you do little things over and over again, you're either going to be increasing or decreasing. And those habits are something that you got from your family and kind of pass through, and maintaining those over time create results. I think have you seen the movie King Richard?
No, I'm not a movie person, but tell me about it.
You should watch it. It's I think you would be really inspired based on what you just said. So it's about Sabrina and I can't think of her sister's name, Williams. It's the pro tennis players. and it's about how they were raised and how their father raised them. And one of the things he says in the movies, he's like, hey, if you don't know what you're going to do tomorrow, you're not going to win. And his whole idea is, what's the routine tomorrow? What's the routine for a winner? And that routine, you know, I've found in my life being able to just not have to think about it, right? When I figured out, okay, I'm going to go on, this is my food eating schedule, and I'm going to simplify what I eat. I told a buddy of mine, because he recommended it to me, I don't know, about a year ago. About 2 months into it, he's like, so how you doing? Like, how's it going? Are you struggling? I was like, you know, it's weird. And he's like, what? I was like, I don't even think about what I'm going to eat. He's like, that is the bonus that most people don't realize, is you already know. You don't have to spend energy on it. And that's the power of a routine, is you know what you're going to jump into. And even tying back to your franchise, you know what you're doing. You know that this process is proven, and you can lean on the shoulder of titans, being able to say, I know this works, rather than let me see what works. And then not sure how, you know, even if you get a little success, is this really what I should pour into, or something else?
Yeah. And also, when you get into a routine and you do it for so long, when you get out of it or you miss a couple days, something feels off. Like, you can physically, mentally, emotionally feel off. And that's what I love about routines, is that it's a lifestyle. It's not, I mean, I would call it a lifestyle. I know that when I eat bad, like, my stomach physically hurts. Like, my body can't handle it. So just like, being in that routine has been so helpful for me.
That's awesome. All right. So at the end of these episodes or shows or the podcast, I like to do what's called a speed round. Okay. So it's just kind of like, the idea is a speed round of value. And it's an opportunity for the listeners to see trends and different answers that people are giving. Okay. So are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So question number 1, in your business, if you were on an island in the middle of nowhere and you had a phone call, and you could make a 5-minute phone call a week, and you had one metric you needed to track to see if it was succeeding or not, what would that metric be?
I think that metric would be, honestly, just input and output.
Okay.
It would be, because the way that my business works is, it's strictly numbers. It's outreach, right?
Yep.
So I know that if my guy who does acquisitions makes 50 calls a day, sends 150 texts a day, and contacts 100 people every single day, I know he's going to bring in 4 deals a week. So as long as I can see those metrics and see those numbers, I know that they're on track, and I know that we're getting properties.
Nice. And so you said input and output. Is the output the number of calls and this? What's the input? Is there a response you're looking for as well?
Yeah, so there's a response rate that we try to hit. So in terms of texting, right now we have a very, very high response rate. It's like 70 to 80% of our texts. Typical for this model is closer to like 30, 40%. So I know that if I'm at 50% or above, we're golden. And then calls, for every 40 that you make, you should be getting 10 in. So again, those are more of like the input that we get. But if we're putting the output in first, then we're going to get the input in return.
Nice. That's really powerful. That's awesome. All right. Number 2, excuse me. Now, I know you said you weren't a big reader, but if there
I do read.
You do? Oh, you do? Sorry.
Yeah.
What book would you recommend someone getting into this industry? It could be a real estate book or not, but what would you recommend one of your peers?
I mean, I think in real estate, like, if you haven't read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you need to do that. But I would say, as an investor, since it's such a numbers game, negotiating is literally so powerful. So my favorite negotiating book is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, I believe is the author. And that helped me so much just with negotiating to get the prices that I wanted for my own investments and for wholesale deals. So probably those 2 books are my recommendations.
Chris Voss's book is one of the ultimate books that changed the game for me. I listened to the Audible. Gosh, it had to be right when it first came out. I got it, and it changed the game. What's your favorite technique out of the book?
I love like matching people, mirroring people, matching people's moods, that kind of thing. I've found that to be really, really helpful, especially with buyers. So if you're a wholesaler and you're out there trying to get cash buyers on your list, match their voice, match their mood on the phone. If you come on the phone and you're super energetic and the buyer is really standoffish, cool down a little bit. I found that to be really helpful on the dispo side, is just doing a lot of the mirroring techniques. What about you? What was your favorite from the book?
I like the labeling.
Yeah.
The labeling has completely changed. Just, it looks like, it seems like, it feels like. That it's given me an opportunity. I just did another video about how not to get stuck in a conversation. A lot of times, sometimes we get into a corner and it's like, how do I get out of this? And a lot of times all you have to do is just label what's going on. Hey man, it seems like, you're a little uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden it's like the whole situation changes. And, it seems like what I'm saying is, it seems like it might be unfair. How are you processing this? Do you mind if we process it together? And stuff like that has been my biggest takeaway out of that one.
Yeah, I think starting sentences with "it seems" is very, very powerful. I did take that away from that book too.
Yeah, I love it. So, all right. So what do you do to, now you're part of a network, but what do you do to intentionally network and mastermind with other investors or other people, either locally or nationally?
Yeah, I'm friends with a lot of like local investors, and my office that I work in currently is in a real estate office. So I'm naturally in contact with a lot of people, but just attending like real estate meetups, there's a ton. If you're in any decently large city, there's always real estate meetups. So going to those and just having like a teachable, coachable mindset has been really huge. And then there's a ton of things within the Keegley and like astro flipping community. Jamil and Pace constantly are putting out seminars. They're constantly traveling around and talking to different investors. So just whenever I can, being on those. And then I think too, with, just my outreach in terms of cash buyers, in terms of other investors, just having that day-to-day conversation has been really helpful for me. Even though they're in the Detroit market and I'm in the Wisconsin market, I can ask them, hey, with this flip you just bought, did you change your buying criteria at all? And then that can kind of help me with my local investments as well. So yeah, those are the main ways.
That's awesome. That's sweet. So if you lost everything today with where we're at,
yeah,
things were to just go horribly wrong, as you were going to death spiral and you had to rebuild, what would you do?
I actually don't think it would be that hard to rebuild, because I find that my knowledge is really the most powerful thing that I have. Like, even if I lost everything, I know that I could rebuild it just because of what I know. But I would hop on the phone. I mean, I'm big on cold calling. I know that I can literally hop on the phone and talk to people for a couple hours a day and put deals together. So I would probably start there, because it's just, my work, it's my effort. It's not spending a ton of money. But I know if I put in the hours, I put in the time, I'm going to get results. So that's probably what I do. I'd hop on the phone, I'd start talking to agents and wholesalers, and start doing some wholesale deals.
Awesome. Well, Aubin, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a fantastic conversation. You dropped a lot of nuggets, and just the, that drive that you have is really admirable. So thank you so much. If people wanted to reach out to you and connect with you, how could they do that?
Yeah, I have a Facebook, Aubin Gosson on Facebook. I do have an Instagram. I don't use it that much, so probably don't contact me there. But email, phone number, if anyone wants to connect on a real estate level, wholesaling, investing, I'm always happy to chat, even if we're in different markets. So you can absolutely connect my email with anyone who reaches out. It's aubin@keegleydet.com. And I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Well, guys, this has been the Forge to Win podcast. Go to our website if you're looking to get into wholesaling or you're looking to get into real estate. I have a free course on the website. You can go check it out and go through it. Otherwise, guys, go out there, put in the effort, and make it happen. Until next time, thank you.